to the Wallace Center and the National Good Food Network. The Wallace Center, a business unit of Winrock International, is the host of the NGFN webinar series. The Wallace Center has been a leading organization in the movement for a more sustainable, equitable food system for over 25 years. Today, the center supports entrepreneurs and communities as they build a new 21st century food system that is healthier for people, the environment, and the economy. The center serves the growing community of civic, business, and philanthropic organizations involved in building a new good food system in the United States. In particular, we're focused on advancing regional collaborative efforts around the country to move what we call good food healthy, green, fair, affordable, beyond the direct marketing realm into larger scale wholesale chains. The National Good Food Network, or NGFN, is an initiative of the Wallace Center. It is structured as a network of networks, ensuring efficient flow of information and innovation from boots-on-the-ground projects to the national level and back down to the grassroots level across the nation. The Wallace Center coordinates and supports the network. Our goals are to work with the growers to ensure that there is abundant supply of good food to meet the high consumer demand for the product, to collect and disseminate the best models, stories, methods, and outcomes, and to ensure that policymakers are informed about the wonderful successes our network and partners have had so that we can continue to increase support for regional healthy food. You can learn more about the great work of the National Good Food Network on our website, ngfn.org, or anytime, please contact us using that email address. One major piece of the National Good Food Network's work is the NGFN Food Hub collaboration. For the last couple of years, we have worked to support the growth and success of food hubs across the country with a four-pillar approach: networking, research, technical assistance, and intensive work with 9 study hubs and some regional food hub networks. We have a library of fantastic resources on food hubs. You can get them there directly by typing foodhub.info into your browser. This is a collaboration with USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, Center for Regional Food Systems out of Michigan State, Farm Credit Council, Wholesome Wave, School Food Focus, and the National Farm to School Network, all bringing unique perspectives to supporting this linchpin piece of regional food systems. So with that, let's dive in. We begin with Keith Flett, who is the founder and CEO of Open Ocean Trading. Keith will give you the context for his innovation as well as a sense for how it works. We'll then hear from a participant on each side of the transaction. First, one of the sellers, a fisherman, and then one of the buyers, a chef, so that you can get a sense for how it really works in practice. Finally, we'll open the floor to your questions, but as I mentioned earlier, do type your questions in as they occur to you. We will try to get all of your questions in turn. Keith Flett grew up on Long Island, New York, with family who owned commercial ground fishing vessels. He launched his professional career as a young entrepreneur at the age of 22 when he started a wholesale seafood company that purchased product from vessels and directly marketed it to a range of clients in the tri-state area. Keith noticed drastic price volatility that existed and major inefficiencies that hindered the current boat-to-plate supply chain. Continuing his career, Keith consulted for a New York-based commodities exchange where he accepted the role of president of seafood marketing development. It was with this firm that he focused on developing lobster, groundfish, scallop, and salmon forward contracts for commercial hedging of price risk in the seafood markets. Along with his hands-on experience with the seafood industry, Keith has developed risk management strategies and commodities analysis programs for hedge funds and commodity trading advisory firms. Specifically, he spent 3 years developing computer programs and algorithms to analyze and limit exposure in agriculture and other sectors. Currently, Keith is CEO and founder of Open Ocean Trading, where he built custom software for the forward management and trade of fresh seafood products and fishing quotas. So, Keith, introduce us to Open Ocean.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thanks for allowing me the time here to kind of get what we've been working on out to the public. So, yeah, I've been working on this idea of open ocean trading and forward contracts for about 10 years now, and it just seems like I've been following a journey of my life, and it's just led me in this direction. My family, as Jeff mentioned, my family's owned commercial fishing vessels. I've been involved in the industry for pretty much my entire life, and one day my uncle convinced me to go buy a wholesale truck and start shipping his fish into New York City. so that's what I started doing, and I really started to realize what the supply chain for seafood looked like. And my uncle was always complaining about the drastic volatility in its pricing and just basically selling his fish into a well and never really knowing where it went. So that's why I said if you go buy a truck, you can make some money selling some fish into New York. And when I did that, I found out a lot of the reasons of why the industry existed the way it was. And especially as being, from a fishing background and getting thrown into the supply chain, I had a very much different perspective on how things should be. And when I approached the supply chain as, a family member of a fisherman, I really focused on the inefficiencies and how I can return more profits back to the boats and help get fresher and traceable product into the marketplace. So according to my life journey, my cousin was trading natural gas and crude oil on the floor of the New York Mercantile Exchange, and I was explaining to him the problems with the seafood supply chain, and he was explaining to me commodities markets, and we both kind of had this aha moment where we were looking at basically how commodities markets work and how fisheries work and how they can actually, be combined to create a very powerful tool with selling and hedging price risk and getting more direct access to vessels. So I ended up dropping everything and working for him for about 3 years, just exploring commodities markets and what they mean and really what they were set up for. And if you actually look at, the New York Mercantile Exchange, it started as a whole bunch of egg farmers and butter farmers gathering underneath trees in New York City to find buyers for their product and start hedging their price risk and essentially just negotiating contracts with those buyers where they were going to sell their eggs and their butter. So that's the approach that I took to commodities markets, is how can we get more people and how can we use technology to get more people underneath that tree in the food world. And specifically for seafood, since the supply chain was so fragmented and there's so much control over the supply chain, how can you create a marketplace essentially for fishermen and anybody in the seafood supply chain to get involved and start to basically communicate together? So as I was exploring this, and as I was kind of coming up with the theory of open ocean trading, we kind of came across, well, what does fishing and what does the seafood industry, mean to us, and what do we believe in it? And, one of the things we definitely attached on was, well, seafood needs to be sustainable. And in order to do that, you need to make a very durable industry. It has to be able to roll with the punches. The fishermen need to be getting paid, and people need to, get the food to their plate. So the more strong you can make that industry and the more financially viable you can make that industry, the longer it will last. And then you have to look at the actual fishing communities. And, if you're looking at a sustainable fishing and sustainable fisheries management, then you're going to have to really look at stricter regulations at certain points in time, whether, it's weather influenced or if it's influenced through, whatever other factors there are which are many that affect the actual oceans. So when those populations sway, which they do, you need to, really figure out a way for the communities to survive. And the last piece is, seafood buyers, they want to know where their seafood's coming from. They want to get local seafood, and they want to, have some kind of certainty of the product that they're getting and the price that they're getting, so they have the ability to plan. So that's where we really kind of grounded open ocean trading in our business model off of those certain aspects of the industry. So one interesting thing that happened over the course of, well, anybody who's been involved in the seafood industry over the course of the past few years is management has been changing, especially in the United States. And they're starting to go from these input controls to these output controls. So we used to be able to go out and fish a certain number of days using a certain type of gear, and sometimes they regulated by horsepower or what nets you were using. And what they did is when they assigned these days at sea, and they just assigned the tax, the total allowable catch that can be caught, you had all of these boats that just went out and raced for the fish, because the first one who went out and caught it and brought it back to the dock basically, could catch the most. So it was a very volume-driven model, and it just incentivized the fishermen to fish harder. And what happened was we started to see some depletion of stocks because it's very hard to control the effort when you can only cap so much and everybody's trying to push as hard as they possibly can. So what they decided somewhere is they should go to a different kind of control mechanism, which is an output control, where they're going to be looking at catch shares or quotas in order to manage the stocks, meaning a boat can only go out and fish so much, but he can fish it whenever he wants and sometimes is however he wants. So it made each fish count. So every time a boat went out and he actually went and caught fish, he had to make sure he was getting the most money because he only had a certain amount. Where back in the input controls, they could just fish harder, get more fish, bring it to the dock, and essentially their biggest hedge was just going and fishing more. So it really changed the way that fishermen have to interact, and it really forced a whole different mindset of how they have to interact with the oceans. So they had to start looking at their margins. They had to start looking at, well, how can I fish more efficiently? How can I fish more, not necessarily effectively, but how can I get the most per pound that I can for my price of my fish? And that's where we really saw something very interesting happen, because as quotas get assigned, and no matter how you look at it, sometimes it's very unfair in the way that they assign the quotas, and there's definitely problems that exist inside of that. But fishing communities started to see some problems when poor allocations got put down to them, where when they used to just be able to fish harder, all of a sudden they can't. So the product just can't come over the docks. So they need to figure out ways to fish smarter, more efficiently, and get better pricing for their catch. And that's where we really found a unique opportunity for open ocean trading. So if we looked at what the problems were in the industry, which was, low vessel prices because it's a volume-driven business. It's very difficult to find and access quota, which is something I'm sure Tim will talk about in a minute. And whenever they do quota reductions, like in New England right now, it puts massive problems into the industry because essentially they're just getting rid of financial money flow that used to go through these communities in the seafood industry. So what also happened is you start to see some market instability because some of the problems that just came from not knowing what to do and fishermen not going out. So the market just kind of couldn't really keep up. And what really I focused on was that the problems that we saw in the fishing industry were definitely underscored by some of the challenges that are currently in the supply chain. So when you look at fishermen and how they used to fish, if they fish hard, they bring the product back to the dock, they would essentially just let that go through the supply chain, and they didn't really care where it went because their goal was to go fish more because that's the only way they could hedge their actual income. So what happened is you start to see fish houses almost gaining a lot of control over where the supply went, and the boats had no interaction with what happened to their fish afterwards. And on top of that, there was a lack of transparency that happened in the industry because I look at it as they used to fill holes. So if you had 1,000 pounds of fish, which is a very low estimate, let's look more at like 100,000 pounds of fish that would hit a dock, the dock's job was to find a place for that to go before it expired. So they were pushing that product on the market as hard as they can, as fast as they can. So the lack of transparency came not only because we never knew where the fish was going as soon as it hit the dock, but if you didn't know where your fish was coming from, somebody told you it was something else, there's a chance you can get a higher margin for it and find a new hole that didn't exist before. So that started to lead to more product manipulation where people were saying, well, what if we soak this stuff to add a few more cents? What if we manipulate this product in certain ways in order to increase our actual value for the fish? So you started seeing more seafood fraud come around because essentially people started making their margins off of it. Since they were dealing with so much high volume and had to find all these holes for the seafood to go for, they started to actually just mislabel it completely. So that inefficiency in the marketplace, somebody had to drive revenue off of that in order to make the marketplace exist. So those inefficiencies, and this goes for any market that you ever look at or any supply chain you ever look at, whenever there's an inefficiency in a marketplace, you'll always find that somebody's making money off of that inefficiency. And that's where open ocean kind of started coming in, is saying, well, what if we started connecting more fishermen directly with their buyers? What if we started looking at complex supply chains and really assessing the value chain system in which they exist and really start to connect that boat to that end user, no matter how that might look. So, you still need processing, you still need distribution, you still need value-add things that happen to seafood. But what if you started a mechanism that started connecting people and getting rid of those inefficiencies? And that's really where we found open ocean starting to exist. And what we really found as the solution is forward contracting. So if you look at a boat and their perspective on the industry and they say, okay, well, I plan on going out and I have 1,000 pounds of quota, again, low estimates, 1,000 pounds of quota that I need to fish over the course of the next year. I need to make sure I make the most amount of money. So any logical businessman, instead of going and fishing it and bringing it back to the dock and just selling it, would say, well, I'm going to go try and sell my fish, and I'm going to go try and find a home that's going to give me the most value for it. That way I can make the most efficiency around my fishing practices. But the problem is that fishermen don't market, fishermen don't get out, and what they know is how to catch fish, which is very complex, especially if you try and catch them in any kind of volume. So there was a disconnect between what the fishermen needed to do and what to essentially survive at this point underneath new quota management, and what their skill set had. So that's where we came in and started creating these forward contracts, or at least starting to broker these forward contracts, which evolved into open ocean trading, and really connect them in forward time and start to market their fish into a broad supply chain. And we also use technology to kind of ground our company, A, in the easy execution of formalized forward contracts, but B, because now we can get that fisherman out to a much broader audience that he could never reach before going through his normal dock. So what we found is we now have price stability because we're locking in contracts with buyers, and we have market transparency because we're actually marketing the fishermen themselves and the fish that they plan to catch. And we grab some superior efficiencies inside the value chain because instead of a boat unloading its catch and that product just finding its way into whatever market it can, we're aligning these value chains before they even leave the dock. So we can set up all the logistics, go through the pricing structures, and figure out every way to make the most efficient value chain from point A to point Z and get the most money back down to the boats and try and reduce the prices to the consumer as much as possible. But what we really found is when we launched our company and we thought we were going to be great and everybody was going to be using us because of the efficiencies, when we reduced the waste inside the industry, we were getting rid of a lot of people's profit margins, and that didn't make people too happy. And it really kind of threw our company for a tailspin because as we had all the buyers ready to go and all set, as soon as they started to realize how much we were creating some efficiencies inside the supply chain, a lot of people didn't want to participate with us. And that's when we had to start reaching out to the end users, and that's when we started going after the institutional food service people like Chef Tiger that you'll hear from in a second. And we had to get past the problems in the current supply chain and start creating our own. So I'll breeze through a few more because I know I have a limited amount of time. I'm trying to sum up 10 years of work in 15 minutes, which is sometimes difficult to do. But essentially, we got more profit through the knowledge of what's happening. So harvest planning, we can start to price this quota, which gets traded back and forth between the boats. We can come up with long-term strategies for these vessels and for the buyers, and we can create better margins for anybody involved in the value-add piece. And when we really started looking at how this market can evolve, we started realizing that these contracts can be lended on. So we can start giving boats, since they have a formalized business plan, we can start giving them money to actually go out and fish and make improvements to their boats and make their business more efficient. We can increase the net worth because there's new access to capital that they've never had before. We created more supply chain diversity, and what I mean in that is if we're allowed to set up contracts between boats and buyers, we can look at a broad range of buyers that it's our job to figure out how it gets from point A to point Z, and then through the technology piece, we can figure out all these different complex places that it goes, and we have the time to plan to do so. So we really started setting up a whole different supply chain outlook on how everything's going to move. And one of the really cool parts about it is after you look at the profits that's going to start deriving back down to the fishing industry is the consumer can start to be engaged in the story of fish. So if I can tell Tim's story, who you're going to hear in a little bit, or I can tell, a New Hampshire boat or somebody, one of the projects we're working on in Africa, if I can talk about a rural fish farm in Africa, that people would like that story. They want to have that connection to how their food's produced. So with the forward contracts, since we're selling everything ahead of time, you have the ability to tell that story. You have that ability to know who exactly is going to be fishing your fish. So to get really quickly over the open ocean trading business model itself. So we're a transparent and competitive electronic marketplace. Granted, a lot of our stuff is still phone brokered, and we're going through many different evolutions of our electronic trading platform. But really what we look at ourselves is the food exchange, essentially, for seafood, where anybody who has an internet access can reach right down to Tim's fluke that he'll be fishing on Nantucket this summer and actually buy it right now. And the transparency and the competitiveness of the market is actually what derives pricing. So we can actually start to really assess what's the pricing of this person's fluke on Nantucket this summer. And we allow buyers to access the product and secure it at fixed pricing, sometimes variable pricing. It all depends, but really our core initiative is to definitely attach a fixed price for whatever a person's catch is going to be over the course of time. And one of the things that really confuses people is we don't buy and sell fish. They look at us as a broker. We're not a broker. We don't even have permits to actually sell seafood. because all we do is make the connections between buyers and sellers through our electronic marketplace. So we're really just a conduit of information that allows people to directly access each other. So sometimes the perspective of OpenOcean is that we're a broker or that we're trying to just trade fish, but we're not. We're not at all. All we're trying to do is connect buyers and sellers no matter where they exist, no matter what they're fishing, and no matter when they're fishing. So that information is communicated efficiently between the parties who are the people who need the fish and the people who are catching the fish. And what we really try to promote is industry durability, the long-term duration of this industry. And if you look at what's going to happen over the course of the next few years, our job is to figure out, well, what needs to happen for the industry? What needs to happen for the fisherman? What needs to happen for the buyer? And what's going to happen with the biomass? So we can really start to judge what the pricing of seafood actually should be. So very quick summary of how it works is a fisherman and a buyer negotiate a contract before they leave the drop through us. It can either be done online or we have people on the other end of the phone trying to help and negotiate. Fishermen get to know exactly how much to fish, so what kind of products the market's actually demanding at any point in time, and what they'll be earning when they get back. And one of the cool parts that we found is the seafood is then landed and it gets to the plate quicker since we know where it's going ahead of time. So since we know that Chef Tiger needs pollock next semester, I know exactly who's going to be fishing it, when he's going to be fishing it, and how the most efficient way to get it from that boat to Chef Tiger's plate happens. So I'll give a very quick mitigation of risk and a little bit of the finance end of open ocean trading. So one of the cool parts, and I'll breeze through this one a little bit, is so if you establish a contract in November, you can look at what the seafood and the expected prices over time. And one of the really interesting parts that we found is since a fisherman essentially owns that resource, and not technically doesn't own it because of the National Marine Fisheries Service, but they have the rights to go fish that resource, they can actually store that resource as long as they're good fishermen out in the ocean. And it reduces the storage costs on land. So if I lock in a long-term contract, it usually ends up being in a higher price than what they would ever expect the average price to be. So if you look at the actual price volatility on the market, the forward contract isn't about the highs and it isn't about the lows. It's about the medium. It's about the median. It's about the exact middle of that pricing. And then if you're looking at a fresh contract and you demand that off the boat, it actually increases that price beyond what the average would have been. And then if you're looking at a forward contract that is a frozen contract, it actually lowers it. And it has a little bit to do with options pricing and whatnot. But I won't get too deep into that, but that's a fun conversation if everybody wants to have it, about what actually happens to the price. So one of the really cool parts that we found is our pricing has either come in at expectations of buyers or under expectations of buyers of local seafood at the same exact time that all of our contracts have been 3% to 300% over the spot market pricing. And it all has to do with just eliminating volatility and limiting perceived risk in the marketplace. So this forward contracting mechanism doesn't only connect buyers and sellers, the efficiencies that it creates in the supply chain and the efficiencies that it creates through the mitigation of risk actually derives higher pricing for fish and actually returns more down to the boats. So a quick breeze through the benefits, and you'll be hearing a little bit more directly from the horse's mouth. So institutions can make more informed decision making. They have pricing power, so essentially they're the ones actually establishing the price of fish, not mid-supply chain members. They have more predictable costs. They have more options and flexibility over their purchasing and their purchasing agreements. And they have an increased quality, and they have this sense of social responsibility because they know the boat that they're actually supporting. They know that fisherman that gets that check at the end of the day. And fishermen almost get the same thing. They get the informed decision making, so now they can actually know when to fish and what derives the highest pricing. They have the pricing power now because they're interacting with the buyers and they're saying, well, what if I fish this at what times and what would be my best price? And they have the decision-making power to know when exactly they should be going out. Their revenue is predictable, so instead of them going out fishing, unloading fish back at a dock, and then just getting assigned a price for their catch, they can now know exactly how much they're going to be making, and they can literally, quote-unquote, bring that to the bank and say, this is what my business plan is. They have a much broader market reach because now they're accessing not just that one dock that they unload at, but now they're accessing any buyer that is around, and they can actually even decide what ports are more efficient to unload at. And they can align their production with demand, which is a big piece that is overlooked in catch share management. So we create the marketplace, and this is a big thing that I try and promote, is catch share management is a market-based solution for catching fish and assigning quota. But there's no market that supports that, and the current supply chain doesn't support this new management system. And that's why we're seeing so much crisis going on in this industry right now, is because the marketplace isn't ready for the catch share, because there's no way to align what the supply and demand would be. So that's why you're finding fishermen, they need to change their complete way that they interact with both their vessels and their fishing practices, but then they also have to change the way that they interact with the marketplace and how they get the information out and when they actually plan on fishing. So the industry, I'll do a quick touch on the overall idea around the industry and how it benefits, but definitely greater market efficiency. There's much more transparency since you're directly interacting with the vessels. There's healthy competition, so it gets rid of that undercutting competitiveness, I'll put it, in the seafood industry, and it starts to get more of the information and the vessels out there and what's actually happening in the supply chain to the buyers. So people can still be competitive in nature, but it's grounded to the actual fish production, not around, seafood fraud or any kind of product manipulation that could occur. And we have the ability to, and this is one of the things we're looking at now, if you go into unsustainable fisheries and you start to attach yourself on what's actually happening on the ground there, and we can reward vessels for starting to come over to more sustainable fishing practices. So there's buyers out there that are starting to interact in the supply chain because they support sustainable seafood and they want to support sustainable seafood, and they find their sales growing if they do take on some of these initiatives. So we definitely allow to promote that stronger resource. We allow the fishermen to make the change that they have to fish sustainably, but we give them the economic incentives to do so. And without doing that, that's when you're going to see the devastation in some of these communities as the pressure starts to move more towards sustainable fishing. And one of the great parts about this as well is when you start to engage the supply chain and you start looking at these very small fishing in these rural communities that essentially some of this stuff is just ingrained in their nature and there's nothing else they can do, you allow them to really access a market and get those things and get that artisanal fishing industry in the limelight where people will actually pay more for the day boat fish, for people going out in canoes in rural areas, because that's what you want to know behind your food. So we have a long list of buyers and people that support our system. We've gotten grant money from many different areas at this point. We we're in the process of getting some NOAA Fisheries SK grant funding for promoting some underutilized species like dogfish. We work with a lot of the environmental type companies and NGOs out there, and that's pretty much it for us. And I'm sure there's lots of questions, and I'll be happy to entertain any of them.
Thank you, Keith. Wow, that is, I just love this model. So let's now turn to the seller's perspective. Tim Barrett is our fisherman, and he's going to explain how these forward contracts have affected him and his business. Tim Barrett grew up on coastal Massachusetts near Green Harbor in the town of Marshfield, a harbor that has a fishing history dating back almost 420 years. Growing up with relatives and friends in the industry, it was natural for him to enter the field. Tim started fishing in the early 70s after attending the Marine Fisheries and Technology program at the University of Rhode Island. Tim went on to captain a number of different boats that participate in different fisheries in New England. He's now the owner-operator of the fishing vessel Odessa, a 42-foot groundfish dragger out of Plymouth and Nantucket, Massachusetts. Tim is also vice president of Northeast Fishing Sector 10, a collection of about 35 boats from ports south of Boston to Cape Cod that are fishing under the new regulatory program, Catch Shares. Tim. And don't forget to unmute Tim. Well, looks like Tim may have been disconnected, so we will skip over the seller's perspective for right now and go right into Chef Keith Tiger's perspective. So Keith is the executive chef for AVI Fresh at Wellesley College. He's also the district chef for Eastern Region of AVI, covering Sarah Lawrence College in Yonkers, along with Hunter College and Baruch College in Manhattan. He has 16 years of campus dining experience that he uses to specialize in international cuisine and also in purchasing. All right, Chef Keith, take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll get right into what I have for you and my relationship with Ocean and what we've been able to accomplish here at Wellesley campus and what I'm also working on to spread to other campuses within my district and within my company. My first slide here is the reasons why I chose Open Oceans. Keith approached me, almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, with his idea and what they were doing, working with local fishermen. And you know, I'm an Ohio guy. I've been in the Boston area now for almost 4 years, so deep ocean fishing and things like that are a new task to me. So it was very interesting, and it was something I wanted to research. And what caught my attention was the first point there is, you know, they are trying to drive a market for the underutilized species, and that's what we began to key in on and serve to our students. And those species include pollock, redfish, dogfish, and hake. You know, the thing that you see any restaurant you go to is you see the cod, you see the mahi-mahi, you see salmon, and you see those other types of fish that everybody knows. Pollock, the redfish, the hake, and the dogfish are things that most people have never heard of before, or if they have limited experience with them. So what we wanted to do was feature those fish on our menu, let them taste them, let them experience them, and then that'll help the market in general, because the biggest thing that I learned with these species is that the fishermen go out and catch them on a regular basis, but the money that they get for these different fish is so low that it's not worthwhile for them to fish. Then the biggest asset that I believe we've been able to help the company with is the fact that developing knowledge now for these students that we're feeding these new to them items, that they're going to recognize them as consumers in the future, build a taste for them now while they're in college, and when they're out in the market as consumers later, they'll be able to recognize them on a supermarket shelf and be more inclined to buy them, which would drive the market for everybody. Second point there, promoting local economy. Like I said, Keith did a great job explaining a lot of what he does on a daily basis with the fishermen, and that's a lot of what I've experienced. We're promoting the local economy because we're creating demand for a product that there isn't a great demand in the area for now. And also those fishermen know what they're going out, what they're making before they leave the dock. Since I've been in the Boston area, you know, I see on the news all the time that the fishing market is dwindling. You know, captains are selling their boats on a daily basis. The market's not there for them anymore. It's being taken over by large corporations or international vessels. So as a chef, it makes me feel good that we can keep fishermen out on the water and help them go out and catch so that they can support their family. Next up, I have one thing I've noticed is quality of product. Pollock is a fish that I've used in the past. To me, it's never been a great product. It's a good product. It's good to fry. It's it has its uses. But so when this model was brought to me and pollock was one of the items recommended, I was hesitant at first because it's a product that I've received. Like I said, I've used before. Sometimes you get some, it's really, really good. Sometimes it's okay, off-colored maybe. And working with Keith, he explained a lot of the process to me, and then also working with Tim, he explained the differences, what I was seeing when I served the product and the reasons behind that. So what I learned and what's been very helpful and us being able to get a great response from our customers for these products is that they're fishing the products when they're at their peak. You know, they may eat a different diet certain times of the year, which may change the flesh color, maybe take it from a bright white to more of an off-color white. And what I've experienced is we haven't had any of those situations because they are fishing it at the best time to eliminate that. Also, it's allowed us to serve a lot more fresh product. In the past, I relied on frozen, and with this new model, I've been able to convert to fresh product on certain days and weeks. Let me see. And finally, demand for local products. One thing being in campus dining, students are very conscious of the environment, sustainability. They're all large keywords that everybody's trying to bring a better commitment to the earth, less of an impact from anything from purchasing to even composting the end product. What this has done for me is you maybe start serving these new products, these new fish to the students, and they've never heard of them before. And at first, they just see the presentation, know that it looks good, know that it, try it, know that it tastes good. But what really impresses them is the fact that I can tell them when the fish was caught, what day it was caught, what boat it was, who the captain was, what the name of his boat is or her boat is, and also where at in the ocean it was caught. So immediately right away, you could tell somebody you're having a pollock Florentine, and they try it, it tastes great, but then when you tell them we're having pollock Florentine that was caught by Captain Tim Barrett on the Odessa off the 50 miles off Cape Cod on April 1st, then they're wow, they're blown away. All right. Now the benefits of contract purchasing to me were the fact that, like Keith said on the fisherman's end, they know what they're getting for the product. I know what I'm paying for the product. I'm doing my budget now for next year, so I can work with Open Oceans, plan my fish and seafood purchases for next year, and I know exactly what they are going to be. There's not going to be any fluctuation. What I agree to pay now is what I'm going to pay for the entire year, and that's huge. That's one less thing that I have to worry about during the year. On a daily basis, everything that's going on right now with the beef and pork industry, the more items that I can lock into a price for the year, the less I have to worry about. The next item is the cost benefit of bulk shipping. When we first started with this program, we were doing all fresh, and we were shipping it FedEx. So basically, we were getting the freshest product possible. Many of the items were fished, bought off the Portland, brought into the Portland pier, processed by the processor the next day, FedExed overnight to me because I'm only about 100 miles away, and I was getting fish, directly from the ocean within 3 days. It's a great model. We love getting the fresh product, but on the other hand, like anybody else, we're always looking for savings. So this next step in the process was to go from always FedEx shipping and taking in anywhere from 20 to 60 pounds at a time to actually doing a bulk purchase. So then we negotiated the pricing for a bulk frozen product, and now on average about every 3 weeks we place a 2,000 to a 3,000 pound order that's brought into campus, and then we're able to store it in our freezers on campus. Another benefit of the contract purchasing is like Keith stated out, it's more money for the fishermen. The more I've learned about the industry since being in the Boston area, it amazes me that You know, you can go out, catch 3,000 pounds of something, pull it all in by hand, unload it from a boat, take it to the dock, and make, you know, $75. So it's a great feeling for all the chefs on campus to know that they're supporting the local fishermen and the local economy. And then probably the best benefit to me is the relationships. Like I said, working with the captains, meeting them, hearing their stories, working with the Open Oceans representatives, hearing what they know, their knowledge, their stories, and then being able to share those with the students. It's amazing. Like I said, I think it's amazing. The next slide you see is our tasting event that we do. We've done 2 of them now. It's amazing to see how interested the students are in all the stories and the reasoning behind what we're doing and the reason why we're serving a certain fish to them. And basically the tasting events, what we've done is we've taken the underutilized species, prepared them all into bite-sized portions, had all of the marketing material there for the students to see, let them try them, sample them, discuss them, explain the differences and all the facets of the preparation. And then that leads us to our survey that we do, and we get all their opinions on which ones they like, which ones they didn't like, which ones they'd like to see more on campus, and so forth. So these are great, great to let us know how we're doing, and if the students really are interested in the program or presenting them. Next we have making it work. You know, like I said, every chef is cost conscious. I run campus dining. I run a board plan. Students pay a flat fee, eat as much as they want. So to increase the price, maybe I may be paying double for pollock from Open Oceans versus if I bought the cheapest thing I could find through my mainline vendor. So you have to be creative in how you use those products so that you can still work them into your budgeted system. And one of the things we've done across campus is it's a combination of the marketing and plating those items versus having buffet style or self-service where students can eat as much as they wish. We do a lot of complete meals. We serve the fish plated with a starch and a vegetable, so it's a complete restaurant-style plate where I can control that they're getting a 3 or a 4 ounce portion of fish versus a 6 ounce or 8 ounce if they were serving themselves. And like I said, the biggest thing in making it work is a lot of the marketing aspect of it. The more you let the students know about what you're doing and why you're doing it, the better off you are. And yeah. That's all I have. Yeah, thank you.
Great, Chef Baggett, thank you. And I think that, well, we have Tim back. Tim, are you able to hear us?
I'm hoping you're able to hear me.
Yes, we can. Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've changed the way the value chain works. Heard from the buyer first, but Tim, why don't you share with us your perspective? Tim is a fisherman. I read his bio before, but he's been a fisherman for a long time and really has seen the industry move in a different direction. So go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Yeah, as Jeff said, I was a fisherman. I started early. I started young. I grew up down the street from my harbor and wound up, had an older brother that got into the fishing industry and got conscripted by my parents to go help my brother. Went down and started working on the deck of his boat in the 70s and worked alongside him as well as a number of other people in the harbor, and working in various fisheries. I've worked in the lobster fishery, scallop fishery, bluefin tuna, as well as the ground fishery. And it's been about 30 years now since I've been on the ocean. I've been running my own boat now for about 20 years. I've had a number of different boats. Right now I own the Odessa, originally from Plymouth, and now working down out of Plymouth in Nantucket, and spent most of my life as ground fisherman. And in the early days, the way we had to sell our fish, there was a great number of boats fishing. There were very few limits in the 70s. All you needed was $50, and you'd get a permit to go catch as much as you like. The auction setup was that boats would come in and have their fish listed, and certain bigger boats would have their catch listed on the auction, and then the dealers would come down to this one auction house in the various harbors, Boston, Gloucester, and New Bedford. I mostly worked out in New Bedford, and bid on those particular boats. They bid on a number of different species that the boats would have. The ground fishery contains 16 different species, and that would set the price for the day. Later on, along came a seafood auction that was based on the internet, and it was modeled after the Dutch auction, where lots of fish would go through, certain lots of fish would go through that people would then bid on independently. So it wasn't so much set on the single boats that came in and how their catch was. It was set on various smaller lots of fish and what condition those particular fish were in. In the meantime, about 4 years ago, we came under a new regulatory scheme, which was called catch shares. I'm sorry. And catch shares gave each vessel a set amount of fish to catch in relation to their permit that they had. And there was a certain qualifying period where the catch rate that permit had was allotted fish for. So the boats now had a finite amount of fish that they could catch. And what that caused was that the boats then had to start to pre-plan for what they were doing. If you were going to catch over that amount of fish that you were allotted, you would have to lease that quota. That quota was available in various different ways, but you would lease it from other people, other boats that would not be using it, and you had to wind up planning for the future under that quota system. If you didn't, if you continue to go to the auction system, you wind up losing days. The market price could be very volatile. At times you'd come in and the price of the fish would be high. Sometimes you come in and the price of the fish would be very low. At times we have to lease fish at 80 cents, 90 cents, $1, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. And sometimes you wouldn't get that price on the board. So you go out and catch all this fish, and you wouldn't get the price that you needed for that fish. So essentially you went out fishing for nothing and brought in something for everybody else to play with. Accessing the quota was not that easy. Sometimes you wind up having to really have to stop and search for the quota. And it takes quite a bit to align yourself with the quota that you have within your regional area. Different regions in the area will catch different types of fish, and not everyone was allotted, not every permit was allotted the type of fish that you specifically needed for that area. This greatly affected the small-scale fishers, because a lot of those boats would go off and do different things throughout the year. They go tuna fishing, they go scalloping, they go lobstering. Traditionally, a lot of times, ground fishery was a winter fishery for the smaller boats. Personally, I'd go work on squid fishing, which is a state permit, or fluke fishing out in Nantucket, which is a state permit as well. So the small boats didn't have as much quota as they needed. So as it came along, you needed to really have to start to plan on where you would sell your fish and to make sure that your fish would get every penny that you could get out of that. There's a value assigned to that fish before it's even caught. So along came open ocean trading. Now with open ocean trading, I've been able to take my fish and have a home for it before I go out fishing. I've done it before, and it's been very successful. And it's quite a different feeling going out knowing that you are then going to be profitable when you get into the dock. We have a lot of fixed costs. Of course, the fuel cost is going very high. And now that you have a contract, you can at least point to something and say that I know I am going to wind up being able to continue to fish. The only other option here really is just folding up and leaving, which is unfortunately has happened to quite a few boats in the market. A lot of people have not been able to continue to go fishing. That being said, you know, there's still a need for large boats. Large boats carry a big part of the market. They provide continuity within the marketplace in the United States. The United States has lost a good amount of the market share. We have a lot of imports that come in, creating a lot of competition. The competition, some of that product is very, very good product. It's well treated, and you know, it deserves the market spot that it has. On the other hand, you have a lot of the product that is really comes from areas that don't have a lot of oversight and don't have the quality controls and system checks that you see in the United States, and it's really not the type of quality stuff that people would want to eat in the United States. There's a real problem with that. We've lost quite a bit of the market share in the United States because of the way the fishing has gone now. But we've been able to hang on there and keep on bringing fish to the dock. And there's a certain set of people that they fit into an area. They fit into an area that you know they are working in the area that they're supposed to be in. You look at people, you know, you can look at some people and say, that guy's meant to be a doctor, that guy's meant to be a writer. And the fishermen are the same way. The people that are now in the fishery have been in the fishery for a long time. And the good thing is about open ocean trading is that you can keep those people in this fishery. You can keep that person within that social group that they've grown up with. The average age of the fleet is 58 years old. Most of the people have a long history of working within the industry. And now the forward contracts gives them an option that will allow them to continue to go fishing and remain profitable without having to suffer from a glut on the spot market, which is the auction market that we have now. The spot market is a very volatile market, and in today's business world, you really need to have a chance to plan ahead. It gives the boats an idea of what the market needs. It gives them a chance to plan ahead and to be able to catch what's needed for that market. And it also helps to increase the value of the boats, of the catch that they have. There's great competition within the industry right now, and for them to be able to identify who needs what and when they need it, I think it really makes an excellent contribution to the industry. Open ocean trading has been very successful when I've done contracts with it, and it helps quite a bit to keep the industry on a stable market and bring it into the 20th century. The auction market, the way it is right now, is pretty archaic. We have a number of people that have made an effort to stay into that. There's a bunch of groups that now want local fish. They want to be able to know where their fish comes from, and it also helps with the food safety of the United States. You're able to now have your fish sold in advance, and you're able to use the local fleets within the United States to provide that. So I think that's about all I have to cover here. Things have worked out very well.
Good, good. All right, so let me start in on the questions. There are several questions that have been sent in already. Thank you all, and please keep them coming. Carl is asking about aquaculture, farm-raising fish. Can you, I think it would be interesting for you, maybe each, to respond to that, but Keith, why don't we start with you? How do you see aquaculture affecting the seafood market?
Well, aquaculture, if you look at the growing demand for seafood, and if we expect at all that the oceans are going to be able to provide us with the resource to fill that growing demand, is not the truth. So no matter how you look at it, the wild fisheries are going to stay basically stagnant from here on in. Possibly some reductions, possibly, it'll bounce around a little bit, probably a few million metric tons, but essentially, if we're hitting MSY, if we're hitting maximum sustained yield, we're going to need to find fish from somewhere else. So in terms of open ocean, we embrace aquaculture. I think it's much easier to deal with than with the wild-caught fisheries, especially under our model. It fits really well. There's some people right now, there's FYSH-X in Chile, who's doing what we're doing. They're about 2 years behind us, but we actually have a great partnership with them. We're going to link our systems. So we definitely are looking at Chilean salmon. What I'm really interested in, actually, me and my wife are working on a project that I'm going to be presenting next week on plugging in small farms. So if you look at the open ocean trading model and the way that the aquaculture is kind of these bigger companies coming in and doing it, what we're trying to do is through the open ocean model, we can plug in very small units into a global supply chain. So we're actually launching a partnership right now with a company called the Fish Farm over in South Africa, who's putting rural fish farms into, or it can basically recycled containers into rural communities in South Africa, and we're allowing them to get a voice inside the supply chain. So we can take these very small, two-person run fish farms and plug them into a much larger structure. So aquaculture is 100% on our radar. It's a necessary piece to provide food security. I look at it as definitely a necessary piece to possibly some solutions to poverty. And I am very excited about this project that we're actually launching in aquaculture.
Great. Chef Tiger, have you used farmed fish, and how is your experience?
Yeah, actually, we use some farmed fish, mainly salmon and barramundi. And yeah, I've noticed a big difference in recent years that seems like you're getting a much cleaner flavor with the fish than what you used to get in the past with especially salmon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Tim, I would expect that you would feel threatened by aquaculture. Is that a correct assumption?
No, not really. It does take over a big part of the market. I think that, you know, farm fish has its place. I think it's very much needed in the supply chain. And as Chef Keith and Keith Bled have said, they're coming out with a very good product. And I think, you know, there is a need with wild fish being restricted so much that there is a need to bring that in. And the resource has, the aquaculture resource has come quite a way as far as putting out a very good product, you know, recently. And in the past, it's been a little bit of hit or miss. It's gone through a great deal of development, and I think it's something that can still be on the table. I think wild fish will always still be just that, wild fish, and still be able to have its place in the marketplace. I hope, at least, anyway.
Okay. Keith, there are several questions about the availability of open ocean in other parts of the U.S. And internationally. Do you want to comment on geographic distribution?
Absolutely. So Brian, my Director of Business Development, has been working on some supply chain issues to get us past New England. And right now we've assembled, well, in the engagement stage of assembling a network of distributors that will be working with us. We essentially set up a distribution system where vessels can unload, be transported to Araho, which is a distribution center in Boston. And then we have the ability now, I believe, Denver, Kansas City, Chicago, and this is all LTL trucking, so it's all very cost-efficient trucking. Where else? And down south, Philadelphia. I think we're getting into some places in Georgia now. So we're expanding our reach, and anybody who's interested in participating in this model, you know, we're always open, and, you know, a big part of our job is to figure out how we get fish from point A to point B. So, you know, anybody who's looking to participate, we're always looking at bringing in new markets and growing those markets. So we're always open for business no matter where you are. And we have the ability to FedEx anywhere at this point. We were shipping scallops down to, I think, the Virgin Islands this winter. So we figure out the way to get it from here to there. Great.
And Keith's email address is right up on the screen now. So contact him. Keith, why don't we stick with you for just a moment? Can you talk a little bit about pricing within the supply chain? Who bears more of the costs? Where are the margins? How do you make your money?
Absolutely. So one way I always look at it is buyers usually have a set budget, and no matter what the pricing is doing, bouncing around, they have an idea of where they're trying to get with their pricing. So pricing does usually originate from a buyer end. And when you look at it that way, basically anything that's being charged on that product is coming out of the fisherman's pocket. So we basically, so basically, you know, if you look at the value chain, and some buyers are different than that, but most of the institutional people have a budget that they're trying to stick to. So what we do is every single value add cost structure we have to look at. So when we go in, especially on larger contracts like with ABI and Chef Keith, we look at every single piece of the supply chain and come up with margins, transportation, processing, freezing yields, yields of fish, and we go through that entire supply chain and lay that out so they know exactly where every single margin, every single touch point of that fish that creates a, you know, a value add piece of the puzzle. And open ocean, what we do is we stick as a transactional fee between the boat and the buyer. So that raw material is where we make our money. And essentially we charge anywhere from 1 cent to 10 cents for scallops, especially Nantucket Bay scallops, we're around $1. But we're usually somewhere between 2 and 5% of the transaction is what we charge. So extremely slim margins, wow. And our whole job is to build volume.
Yeah, and if you know, if I can touch on that real quick, this is Chef Keith. That is one of the great things that I like too in working with them is the transparency. I get to see a sheet that says exactly from beginning of that to end of that fish, how much the fisherman was paid for the fish, how much it costs to process the fish, to freeze it, store it, and ship it directly to my door. So it's a itemized line by line, by the pound, how much it does cost and who gets what out of each step of the process.
Wow, that's great. Can you talk about fish traceability and how that's a piece of open ocean trading?
Yep. So there's two different ends to fish traceability. One is the inherent contract piece, which I like, which puts some kind of enforcement around traceability. So if you look at a forward contract, like Tim this summer, he's going to be on Nantucket fishing fluke. George's Bank, a buyer in Boston, is going to contract 100% of the fleet's production at a premium to the fleet just to have the access to the product. And they know exactly that fish is coming from 6 boats on Nantucket, and they'll know that for the life of all that fish that's unloaded there. And if anything changes, we need to go back to the contract and make sure there's a change in there. So it creates a different sense of traceability where it's a formal contract, and if somebody along the supply chain is manipulating that product, they've broken a written contract that they have on that product. So that's the contractual end of it. And then a lot of our suppliers and a lot of people that we work with, whether it's an unloader like Red's Best or a processor in like North Atlantic, they have the actual technology, so they feel very comfortable working with us. So, you know, with the product that goes through Jared, it comes out with a QR code where you are double reassured that the product that you actually contracted is that product. And a lot of buyers and a lot of mid-supply chain members are starting to use more backbone of technology for the traceability end. So we like to team up with those type of people, and usually they're like-minded with us, meaning, you know, they promote the transparency, they promote a more efficient supply chain, and those tend to be more of our partners than people who make money off of those inefficiencies.
Okay. Tim, what happens if you sign a forward contract and you're unable to deliver? The fish just isn't there. There's some, I don't know, some technical problem. The cooler's not working on the boat, something. What happens?
Well, it happens. There's aspects built into the contract that allow for that, bad weather, allow for breakdowns. The important thing is to keep the lines of communication open and let people know in advance. Essentially, with contracts, we don't want to send people out in a situation where they're not going to be safe about it. But, you know, there's been times where all of a sudden something has happened that a boat hasn't been able to go. So what we usually try to do at open ocean trading is to spread that risk out between a number of different boats, so that within each contract there's a number of different boats participating, so that the other boats will be able to pick up the slack, so to speak, if one of the boats drops out. So unless a contract specifically says I want fish from that exact boat, fish will still be able to go to that. Fish will still be able to fulfill that contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. More, I'm hearing more transparency, which that is great. Joan asks, how can those of us listening help get the word out to our schools, hospitals, and institutions about open ocean purchasing?
That's a good question. You know, we're trying to create a little bit of a movement, you know, not necessarily about us, but about the transparency and getting more of this, you know, collaboration in the supply chain to get product from point A to point C. And, you know, we have people, you know, Brian, we're still a startup. You know, we're 2 years old, and we've gone against a lot of resistance in this mid-supply chain. So, you know, we're still in startup phase. So there's no real direct answer to that. I would say, you know, we love people who have passion for the industry. We love people who want to do good and really try and create some durability in the seafood industry and in the overall food network. And, you know, any way we can work together, talk, and promote, you know, the general movement, you know, give us a ring, shoot us an email. It's something we do on a daily basis around the clock.
Great. Yeah. I wanted to point out that actually just before the webinar began, Chef Tiger was talking about how he also does some forward contracting in other businesses. He was speaking about other animal protein, land-based animal protein. Sally talks about, one of our attendees talks about forward contracting in the 1930s and 40s in England. So I just wanted to point that out to make the point that this concept is applicable to other markets. Fish is an excellent starting point, as Keith said, but it's really it's a powerful and empowering idea. So let me close with this one last question here. How does OpenOcean firmly express their principles for environmental and social sustainability and balance that with the goals of profit and efficiency? She goes on and asks, how are you contributing to true triple bottom line market models for seafood where there's solid, measurable, transparent dedication to the social and environmental values?
So that's a great question. It's something that I personally, as the CEO of the company, try to balance on a daily basis. And I can tell you right off the bat, we have investors that, you know, they support our cause 100%. They've been very gracious, and it's more of an angel than I find somebody who's looking for a real hardcore ROI in our business model. So we've been lucky enough to engage the correct investors in this process. And we haven't set up any core policies of what we do. And one of the things we've actually been even talking about now is how do you engage the traders of seafood and the brokers of seafood in a way that helps them change their practices. And you know, we don't have any core function of our business model. I think it just comes back to the passion that all of us have for the commercial fishing industry and the sustainability of seafood. You know, so we don't sell anything that's mislabeled, or you know, it kind of goes against what we're really trying to promote. And you know, being true to what I say, it's something that I personally don't do, and anybody who engages the OpenOcean model in terms of promoting it definitely doesn't do. And it's a hard corporate policy that we have, although it's not written anywhere. And you know, our investors and our people who give us grants are 100%, you know, want to see our focus on that. And you know, in order for our company to be really viable and really, you know, enter this space with open arms from all the people that are in the space, we have to, you know, embrace and involve ourselves in the discussion of what sustainability is, and try and, you know, guide our company along to those policies. And as we start to grow out of startup phase, where we have a little bit more time to focus on things, we will definitely start to incorporate more policies around that. But right now, we're just 100% focused on the small rural fisheries, and you know, trying to really increase the value of their catch. And again, we have an investor that is very open-minded, who loves the triple bottom line effect of our company, and you know, watches that piece of it too, and calculates that in my everyday movements.
Great. All right. Well, I apologize. We are out of time. I want to do a little bit of close up, but thank you to the attendees for all your excellent questions. I apologize that we can't get up to all of them, and I want to thank Keith, Tim, and Chef Tiger. I especially want to call out Tim, who's so passionate about this work that he's taking time off his vacation to participate in this call.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, no problem. Well, this has been a very stimulating discussion of one way to really change a system that traditionally works for neither buyer nor seller. So what would forward contracts look like in other parts of the food system? Are the buyer compromises too great for large-scale adoption? I would say time and creativity of some of the people on this webinar may tell. This webinar is being recorded. And will be archived on our site, along with the over 50 other webinars we've done in the past. Feel free to send others who you think would have liked to have heard this presentation, and take some professional development time yourself and dig through our excellent archives. You can visit ngfn.org/webinars. This webinar should be up within a few business days. Our webinars are organized into topics, if you look in the left-hand navigation area, so dig into whatever interests you. We do offer our webinars every third Thursday of each month, starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Sign-up links are always at ngfn.org/webinars. Just a couple other resources I wanted to point you to. Foodhub.info is a food hub of information, research, case studies, a map of many of the food hubs across the country. The NGFN Food Hub collaboration is building a community of practice of food hub managers and also food hub supporters, including an active Google group. In the post-webinar survey, you can indicate to us if you'd like more information about this food hub community of practice. Foodshedguide.org is our site for producers wanting to adapt to the changing food business landscape. We have instructive text and case studies with an emphasis on how to have a viable food business in a food value chain. Learn about, for instance, factors to consider when deciding on legal status. Visit foodshedguide.org for more. FarmBizTrainer.com collects some absolutely fantastic resources for former trainers in the domain of financial training, also very useful for farmers directly. Browse to improve your curriculum or learn. If you are a trainer and you have a tool or a curriculum you'd like to share, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to review your work for inclusion in this library. And I wanted to talk about the Vermont University of Vermont Food Hub Management School. According to the 2013 National Food Hub Survey, the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems conducted in collaboration with Wallace Center, on average, food hub managers have between 1 and 5 years of experience across the essential skills of food hub management. Several of the key challenges noted by a significant number of hubs focused on management and staffing issues. At the recent National Food Hub Conference a few weeks ago, we announced a response. A team of experienced food hub professionals worked with the University of Vermont to create the first higher ed certificate program in the U.S. focused on food hub management. 25 students will have the opportunity to begin the 10-month program in January. Through a blend of hands-on, community-based, online, and on-campus learning, this one-of-a-kind professional certificate program prepares leaders for effective management of food hubs and sustainable food value chains. There are only 25 spaces, so if you're interested, inquire now at learn.uvm.edu/foodhub. What URL is there? You can find us on YouTube, ngfn.org, also on Twitter. We are at NGFN. The Wallace Center is also on Facebook. Come like us. And again, if you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a link on the ngfn.org homepage, or the easiest way is just let us know in this post-webinar survey and we'll sign you up. Please contact us at any time. We are contact@ngfn.org. The NGFN would like to thank you for your time again and time today. And once again, let me encourage you to fill out that survey that will open in your browser in just a moment. Thank you. This concludes the webinar.